Cody Heller is a writer, producer, and showrunner. Heller began her career on the FX comedy series Wilfred, which starred Elijah Wood. She went on to co-create the supernatural comedy series Deadbeat for Hulu. Heller worked as a co-EP on the darkly comedic Showtime series Kidding, which starred Jim Carrey. Cody then created, produced, and showran Dummy, which launched on Quibi. The semi-autobiographical 10-episode series starred Anna Kendrick and was inspired by Cody's experience discovering her then boyfriend and now fiancé, Dan Harmon's sex doll. Most recently, Cody executive produced and showran Freevee's courtroom docu-style comedy series Jury Duty, which stars James Marsden. Cody Heller, welcome to the show.
Welcome to Simply Walk the Talk. Our bodies and minds adapt to what we do most of the time. If you want to change your body and mind, you must change what it is you do most of the time. This podcast explores all things health, wellness, fitness, lifestyle, and biohacking. Stay tuned as we explore various thoughts, methods, and experiences from a multitude of conversations between our interesting guests and experts through many fields of work. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Simply walk the talk. Simply walk the talk.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you for being here and thank you for your time. I know you're very busy and I'm sure we will dive into.
I'm not, but thank you for thinking that. That's so kind.
No, it's all good. And I definitely want to make sure we start out by giving a shout out to our mutual friend, Dr. Shaker Pie. So yes. he's the reason why you and I met. And actually, speaking of met or meeting, this is the first time that we've actually communicated camera to camera, right? Yep. And hopefully in the future we get a chance to meet in person. But when I first watched Dummy, I was amazed. By the way, I mean it's a amazing show. And then Shaker actually suggested me to watch Jury Duty. And it was actually on my list for a long time. And I guess I had watched a bunch of other shows and I was so amazed by it. In fact, I told Gordon after I watched it, I was like, Gordon, you have to watch this show because we have to talk about this, right? So for those of you that have been following this show, you may have seen an episode in which we did a recap or we did a Culture Bites, Gordon?
Yeah.
Culture Bites, right?
Culture Bites.
Yeah, so we did a Culture Bites episode in which we went over about 4 different shows and Jury Duty was one of them. And Cody Heller happens to be one of the executive producers of the show. So we're going to talk a lot about TV and movies and all kinds of fun stuff and maybe even talk about sex dolls, which is always pretty interesting. But before we dive in, Cody, let's talk about how you got to where you are today. Like who is Cody from, the earlier years?
So Cody is, I'm a Valley girl. Well, now I'm a Valley woman now because I'm an adult, but born in the San Fernando Valley, still living here today. I did live in other places, but only like within LA basically. So I've never really left LA. My mom is an actress. My dad is a photographer. And so I think I really never even considered the idea of there being careers outside of show business in a way. Like I always just was like, I will do something within the world of storytelling and show business, which is interesting because as I grow older, as being someone who grew up in LA, as you grow older, you start becoming the weird one for being from LA. Like you start meeting more and more people who are like not from LA who have moved here versus right. When you're growing up, obviously everyone is from here. And so that is a weird phenomenon. But yeah, when I was younger, I wanted to be an actress. I went to an arts high school where I was in the theater program and was really into musical theater. And then while I was at that high school, they started incorporating more production classes. So film and TV and writing and directing. And I started taking those courses and kind of realized that I really took a liking to that kind of stuff. And my dad, the photographer at the time, was working at Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, and they have a directing program there. So because tuition was free because my dad was working there, I was like, I will go there. So I went there and studied, majored in directing. And my very first job in Hollywood was while I was still in film school. I took the summer term off, and I was Michael Bay's. I was an intern for Michael Bay, which then turned into I took a full year off of college to be his personal assistant. And that was like my first job ever in the industry. Went back, finished school, finished the directing program. And then after that, went on to be an assistant to Davis Guggenheim, who is most famous for An Inconvenient Truth, the documentary which he won an Academy Award for. And I worked for him for 3 years in the documentary world, and learned so much from him, had such a great experience. I'm still like very close friends with him and his wife, which coincidentally, small world of Hollywood, his wife is the actress Elizabeth Shue. And my mom was in the movie The Karate Kid, playing the mom in The Karate Kid, and Elizabeth Shue played the love interest of Daniel's son in Karate Kid. So it was like very totally random, coincidental, but just very small world kind of thing. So worked for Davis for 3 years. And while I was working for him, in addition to directing documentaries, he also had what's called an overall deal as a director at, I think it was CBS at that time. I forget where it was, but basically he would direct like a pilot per year. And the pilot that he directed the year that one of the years that I was working for him was the remake of Melrose Place. It was one of my first times really seeing the TV writer's room up close and personal. And just, even though it was an hour long and not particularly like my cup of tea content wise, fell in love with the writer's room, the TV writer's room. I really love writing. I love creativity. I love storytelling, but the social aspect of the writer's room was so appealing. It was like, wow, this is a job. You get to go in every day, hang out with a bunch of really cool, like-minded, funny, interesting people, eat snacks, joke around, and just like come up with ideas and talk about characters and motivations and stories and logic and all of these things that were so fascinating. So after that job, I then basically transitioned to working for the showrunners of Melrose Place. And that's when I was like, I think I want to be a TV writer, started writing TV scripts. And then a dear friend of mine, Brett Connor, who I had met while working for Davis, we were both kind of assisting him at various points. We collaborated and wrote a pilot together, which then became the show Deadbeat. But that was what got us our agents, and that's what got us our opportunities working on like Wilfred, as you mentioned. So I had a writing partner for years, and we staffed on several different shows, and then went on to make 3 seasons of Deadbeat on Hulu together. And then toward the end of that, kind of realized I think I had just turned 30, and I was just realizing like, I think I need to branch out on my own, and kind of wanted to tell more personal female-centric stories. And so Brett and I, who is still a dear friend and love him so much, we parted ways as writing partners. And then the timing lined up that I had just started dating Dan Harmon, who is, co-creator of Rick and Morty, created Community. We started dating, and he is, compared to me, especially at that point in my career, he was just like this, so successful compared to me. I was a nothing and wanted to impress him, and was so like, oh my God, I hope that this guy that I'm dating thinks I'm an okay writer, and just all of these insecurities. Anyway, that led to me writing Dummy, And then I used Dummy was never intended to be a show that was ever going to be made. It was just meant to be like what is called a spec script. And that's kind of what you use as a writer to get you staffed on other people's shows. That's your sample that you submit. And that's what the showrunner will read as your sample and decide whether or not they want to meet with you to consider hiring you to be on their staff. But then I got super lucky, and there was this guy named Colin Davis, who is still a very dear friend. He, at the time, worked at TBS, and we had a general meeting, and he was like, I want to make Dummy a show. And we started developing it for TBS, and then it kind of fell apart at TBS, and then he went on to go work at Quibi. We made it at Quibi, and then made that, and then COVID happened, and then I made Jury. And now I'm
Wow.
Back, still in the valley though.
Well, listen, there's so many things that I am just curious about myself. I'm a very curious person. And so anytime there's something that I'm fascinated by, but I don't understand a lot about, I start to just think of all these questions. And one of the first questions that I think would be helpful for not only myself, but also the community of people that are watching the show is, what is exactly a showrunner?
Great question. So basically, when you watch an episode of TV and you see like the credits, and you see there, sometimes you'll see like the writer of the episode, for example. That doesn't always mean that. I mean, it never usually means that that writer truly is responsible solely for that episode. The very nature of TV writing is very collaborative, so it all really comes from the writer's room. And so when you see like staff writer, there are different levels of being a writer. So basically it's like there's staff writer level, and then there's story editor, and then there's producer level, and onward and upward executive producer. So when you see like executive producer as a credit on a TV show, sometimes there are non-writing executive producers, but for the most part, that just indicates their level of being an upper level writer on a show. So a showrunner is essentially the person in charge of, they're the head writer, and they're sort of in charge of overseeing the entire production. So typically, like for Dummy, for example, I was the creator and the showrunner, and that's usually the case, but it can vary. But the showrunner is the person who's day-to-day in charge of most of the decisions and just being the overall vision of the show in one way or another. And, going to the various meetings and being on set, being the, like in movies, for example, the director is always top dog. In TV, it's not that way. In TV, the showrunner is top dog and the directors kind of cycle in and out. Now we're seeing a shift where sometimes a show will be like more auteur based and sort of have one vision throughout. So it's like the same creator, writer, director is the same person, but it all depends. But the showrunner is essentially the person who's the captain of the ship day to day. From overseeing it from very beginning, the writer's room, all the way through production, all the way through post-production.
Which is probably why, if you're like me, you watch the entire Jury Duty, all the episodes and the videos towards the end and whatnot. That's why I see you in there trying to make, poop look like poop, right? I mean, let's just call it what it is. I don't know if you saw that, Gordon.
Seriously, Josh, attention to detail is key, and
yeah.
Gotta get the details.
I mean, it sounds like a very interesting job, because when you talked about when you were first interested in the writer's room, I feel like that's kind of what I do when it comes to working with trainers. And so like I could kind of see myself being like a showrunner when it comes to working with different trainers to maybe help take care of a client. Like for instance, I'm on the road now with someone we'll talk about here in a moment. I know you're a fan of, but whenever I'm away on the road, usually I have some of my other trainers working with my other clients, and obviously I'm overseeing the content and I'm overseeing the programming, so to speak. And so in a way, I'm kind of like a showrunner.
Yeah.
And I love creating I used to call them jam sessions. So instead of like a writing room, we call them jam sessions, where we always get together and we talk about different things that we read or that we saw, and we kind of try to come up with our own little methodology. And so anyway, so that sounds very fascinating, because I really had no idea what a showrunner was, and I was thinking like literally that you're going from like one show to another show and you're hustling as fast as you can, hence showrunner. But that's not the case.
No, it is
Yeah.
exactly what you said. Very similar to what you described in your job. Yeah, it is just that overall, like, you are the captain of the ship and you are figuring out how to delegate properly and make everything work and solving problems, and just, it's really all about being good with people, in my opinion, and being a good leader and knowing how to properly delegate.
Yeah. So you went from doing all the things you did to kind of get you to where you are, and you now successfully created some amazing shows. And I don't know when the award season is coming up, but I don't know like what's happening in the world of like writing and acting and all that.
It's going to be, I think as of now, the Emmys are going to be in January. So
okay,
we'll see if that still happens, but I did buy a dress already, but we'll see.
as you should, because I said it on the episode that we did, the Culture Bites episode that we did, but I'm like, I bet anything you guys are going to win something. Like, you have to. Like,
I'm very superstitious. I'm knocking on wood. I honestly, the Bear, we're up against the Bear for outstanding comedy, and the Bear is just so good. I definitely think they're going to win, and as they should. But I do think we do have a shot with the other categories that were nominated in. James Marsden is nominated, and I think he did such a phenomenal job. I really hope he wins. And then casting, Susie Ferris was our casting person, and she was unbelievable. And I really hope she wins because she deserves it so much. But yeah.
Well, we'll be watching and cheering you guys on. So good luck with that. So let's talk about. I mean, obviously, we skimmed over the fact that you had to create. I think it was jury duty during COVID, right?
Yeah.
So, like, what were some of the challenges with that? And then after that, let's talk about Dummy, because we have to talk about Dummy.
Sure. So jury duty, it was like, basically, jury duty was a weird situation because I didn't create the nugget, the seed of the idea. So I was approached by, I have a couple friends over the years, you meet all these people and you become friends with people. And so there were basically four guys that were involved with the creation of the idea of jury duty. So there's Lee Eisenberg and Gene Sipnitsky, and then there's Dave Bernad and Todd Schulman. And so out of those four guys, I was friends with two of them. And they came to me, and this was like, I want to say early 2021. So it wasn't like in the thick of COVID. It was like COVID was, people were starting to go back into production on things for sure. And, but I hadn't worked on anything since Dummy. And I was definitely like so eager to get back into work. I really thrive when I have a purpose. And when I don't have a purpose, I get very depressed and just like cannot, your show is called Simply Talk the Walk, or Walk the Talk. And I do not do that. Like I have no, if I'm not accountable to someone, it's very hard for me to self-motivate. So I was like, I want a job so bad right now. I need to get into something right now. And this opportunity came to me where they approached me with this idea, and they were like, look, this idea is basically, it's jury duty. In jury duty, there is a guy who is going to think that he is just participating in a documentary about the judicial system and serving on jury duty. but in fact, he is going to just be the only real person. Everyone else is an actor. Everything is going to be semi-scripted. And that is what the idea is. It's nothing like this had ever been attempted. When they came to me with the idea, I was like, that sounds amazing and so cool. I'm so honored that they came to me because I don't have any experience in that world of like, you know, for example, one of the first things that happened after I accepted the job, I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but Nicholas Hatton, who's one of the executive producers on the show, his previous experience was like producing all of Sacha Baron Cohen stuff. So he has experience in that world, mixing real world and scripted. So I was like surprised that they came to me, but also they were like, we want this to, you know, in the writer's room especially, we want this to feel like a scripted show in many ways and have those real stories that you would find in a regular half-hour comedy, but with this added element of a real guy as part of it. So it's kind of like the Truman Show. Like, what if this guy is the star, unwittingly the star of a sitcom? So that was just, it was such an appealing idea. I was so excited by it. I was also terrified. I was also very much like, I have no idea if I can pull this off. No one's done this before. It hasn't been attempted. So there is no way to guarantee that I can do this. Mm-hmm. And I think that fear of like failure was just really enticing. And the masochist in me was like, yeah, like, let's do it, because you could fucking fail and like just fall on your ass and like never be hired again and just be written off completely and blacklisted from Holland. Like all these thoughts going through my head, but I was like, I want to seize this opportunity, and I was very excited to do it. And honestly, like the COVID part of it, it was enough into COVID that it wasn't as big of a thing as like people that were starting to shoot stuff in 2020, for example, because we didn't start shooting it. We started the writer's room in late 2021, and then we shot it in early 2022. So it was kind of later into COVID. But one thing I will say is initially, because of COVID, most writers' rooms had moved to Zoom, and that was what they wanted us to do, was to do it over Zoom. And we did one day over Zoom, and I immediately was like, this isn't going to work. This is not going to work because this show is so complicated. Literally, there are so many versions of every episode and every storyline. We are trying to anticipate a character, a real person who we don't know how he is going to react to things. And it just felt impossible over Zoom. And I also just really thrive on real life energy, and being in the room, I feel like, is just such a different experience. So we wound up just having the room in my backyard, and we just every day, all the writers and many of the writers, another strategy of mine was, when I got the job, I was like, this is such a intense thing to try to tackle. I don't know really how to do it for sure. I'm going to take some guesses on how I think maybe the most effective way to tackle it. And one of my instincts was, I think I should try to hire as many writers who are also potential performers, because back in the day when you were a writer on a television show, and this was back in the day when it's like, you know, regular 22 episode seasons, and just like, it was a very different world. But the writer of the episode would usually be on set for their episode, there to like help with punch-ups and be there to assist the showrunner and the director and the actors and so on. But that's not the reality anymore. Now it's more, you have the writer's room ends, and then you go into production. And because of the nature of jury duty, and because I knew that so much was going to change, you know, I mean, when I look back to like the scripts that we wrote back when we were doing the writer's room, like, yes, there are definitely a lot of major storylines that remain the same, but in general, it was, you know, so much of it was, as you know, improv. So part of it was hiring as many writers who I also thought could potentially be performers. And I think out of all the writers in the room, like, I think we had like maybe 10 writers, and like most of them wound up being in the show in some way or another. Like the guy who plays Noah, the virginal religious guy, he was one of the writers. Carrie O'Neill, that was Mekhi Leeper, who is nominated for an Emmy for his episode, and is amazing. And Carrie O'Neill, one of the other amazing writers, she plays like the security guard at the front who's like wands.
Amazing. Yeah.
Marcos Gonzalez. And then, of course, Evan Williams, who in real life was a lawyer before he became a comedy writer. Not only was he a writer in the room, but then he went on to play the hilarious defense attorney. Like I very much was aware, like I need to figure out a way to sort of have as many people who are involved from the very beginning all the way through the end, because of the nature of this ever-changing, super evolving process that this show is going to likely be.
Yeah, there was a couple of times that I think being in that sort of COVID bubble situation actually worked out for you guys, because I remember there was one point in which you guys needed to do a rehearsal.
Oh yeah,
and so you leveraged the fact that you're waiting for the COVID test results to come in so you guys could do a rehearsal, right? That's pretty cool.
Definitely use COVID to our advantage in terms of Ronald, because there were lots of situations where we were like, well, the reason that this is seemingly weird is just because of COVID. And that did buy us some suspension of disbelief on his behalf.
Amazing. I want to touch on Dummy for a little bit, and then I want to jump into a movement break, because I see you're seated very nicely in the cross-legged position.
Posture. I really need to improve my posture, but I'm working on it.
It's okay. You look great, and you are working on it, because I do see some of your content. So, but let's talk about Dummy. So Anna Kendrick was involved in that, and like I said in the intro, this was a semi-autobiographical docu-series, right? Or mini-series, not a docu-series.
It was scripted. It was based on a seed of a real thing that I then developed into a show and wrote into a thing, and then got Anna Kendrick to play me somehow magically. And now Anna is one of my best friends in the world. Like I didn't know her before. She just played me, and I was like, oh my God, you're better at playing me than I am at being me. I really like you. Can we be best friends?
She crushed it. She crushed it. I mean, now that you're telling me like that this actually was, based on this idea of Dan's sex doll, what was his thoughts on all of that happening? Like, was he okay with it, or was he kind of like,
No, totally. He was so supportive. I mean, so Dan for years had a podcast called Harmon, and he was very, very, his whole thing was just like being very open. So he had already talked about the fact that he owned a sex doll. So it wasn't like I was revealing new information, but really, he inspired me and gave me such good advice, because basically after Deadbeat, I think I mentioned before, but like it kind of coincided. I had this writing partnership, and that ended as I started dating Dan. And after Deadbeat, my agents were like, okay, well, now that you're going solo, you need a new spec script. You need a new sample as a solo writer. And so I was struggling for months, going through at what I thought at the time was writer's block. I was just like, I was working on this one idea and just kind of like not really doing the work, because really doing the work of writing requires doing bad writing first, which is really painful and really scary. And as a person who, I think I have pretty good taste in things, when I have to then write stuff that is bad, it's like, it's so painful that you want to just procrastinate and avoid that. So that's, to me, the origin of my writer's block, is not wanting to face the fact that, like, in order to get any good writing done, you first have to do some bad writing, and then you make it good. But basically I was working on this one idea for a while, and I kind of was dating Dan, who, in my eyes was like, just, he's amazing, and he's just prolific, and he's a genius. and was kind of going to him for advice and being like, I'm just really struggling with this thing. And he gave me what is still the best advice I've ever gotten as a writer, which is, he was like, just first of all, you've been working on that thing for too long. You're too in your head about it. Put it aside. Write something bad. Write a sarcastically bad script that you're not going to show anyone. Just write it. Sit down and just write it, and don't stop until it's done. And then you can just put it in a drawer. You can burn it. You can never show it to anyone, whatever you want to do. But you just got to get something down on the page just to get it out. And at the time, I was kind of like, fuck you. And like, I was so upset about it, but I was also like, it is good advice. And so, and then at the same time, you know, we had only been dating for like, I don't know, 6 months at that point. And part of when we first started dating, one of the early things that came up was just like, we both were like, let's be really honest in our relationship with everything, including like sex stuff. Like, let's share what kind of porn we like, and let's talk about like, and we got really into role play and all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that like probably on our first date came up was that like he had this sex doll, and I was, you know, like, oh cool, like I don't care, I'm highly evolved, it doesn't matter. And then like, the longer we dated and the more serious we got, I found myself like obsessing. I was thinking about the sex doll, and like, as a woman, I was like humanizing her and thinking about her as a person, even though I'd never seen her and she just existed in a closet somewhere. And so it inspired me to write this thing, Dummy. And so I wrote the pilot, and it was meant to be like Dan's advice. It was meant to just be this thing that I was going to write and get out of my system and throw away. But I finished it and I was like, I actually really like this, and I kind of want to use this as my sample. So I showed it to Dan. He was so supportive, thought it really liked it, and I was like, is it okay if I use this as my sample? I can change the names if you want me to. And he was like totally cool with it. And I was like, I mean, I'd rather keep the names, because I feel like, knowing as you know, from my deadbeat experience, I had hired writers in the past. You get all these submissions that you have to read, all these samples, and many of them are great, but a lot of them are very similar. They're a lot of the same things that you're kind of reading, the same story told over and over again. And so I was like, anything to kind of, you know, you got to have a gimmick kind of thing. And I was like, if you have like Dan Harmon's name in the script as like this meta thing, that could like, I don't know, maybe get a little more attention. So luckily he was super cool with me leaving it in, and I left it in. And then, it, like I said, it was meant to just be a sample at that point to get me jobs on other shows, which it did. Like my CoEP job on the Kidding Show with Michelle Gondry and Jim Carrey. And I worked on like a Greg Daniels show and whatever. But then I got lucky enough to have this connection with this guy, Colin Davis, who wound up being able to make it become a real show.
That's incredible. Yeah, like the reason why I am so grateful to have you on the show is because we're talking about things that it's almost like behind the scenes of all the things that we see today. And I'm a huge, like, you know, comedy guy, and I love documentaries. I love like this interplay between semi-scripted and reality and all these things. And so these shows was perfect for me. And, you know, it's like, before we go into our movement break, I do wonder, how often do you get approached with like show ideas, and how annoying is that for you? Or is it?
It's not annoying at all. I mean, it's like you said earlier, I'm like you, I'm a very curious person. So I'm always excited by that kind of thing. There's like, you know, like job opportunities where I have my representatives, my agents and my managers who approach me with like, here's an opportunity to show run this thing or whatnot. And then, but I don't really get, like, it's not like if I'm hanging out at a bar, I will have a lot of people who are like, I have an idea for a show. Like I'm not at that level yet. Whereas I feel like probably Dan gets that a lot more than me, but I don't know. It's never been a thing where I'm like, it's not it hasn't been a thing for me yet, but maybe it will never be.
Well, I ask because
well, you're like, you have a show for me.
I have a show idea. So, and obviously we'll talk about this like at, whenever. But I think it could be brilliant, and it's based on like my love for Jury Duty and Dummy, both. Like it has nothing to do with any of that, but just the style of it. I was thinking like, wow, like I could try to do this thing myself. And what does that look like? Or I've never done anything, right? But I do like the advice that Dan gave you, which is write something bad, and then see what comes up, But I like to go after things like you said earlier about Jury Duty. What compelled you to really go after that is because it hadn't been done before. And that's kind of what the idea I have anyway. So that is, I think, a really good opportunity to do a movement break.
Okay.
So whenever I have a guest on the show, I like to offer the guest to give something to the people that are watching and listening, something that they could do, or something that you typically do when you have been sedentary for long periods of time, like right now, right? Like we've been sitting here, standing here, whatever, for about 30 minutes. What is something that you would naturally want to do to kind of get you out of that moment?
Okay, so it's interesting that you say the word sedentary, because my movement break is planking, which is, okay, so essentially I am a very lazy person. I did not have like pre-COVID, I was like kind of into hot yoga. That was like my thing. But then once COVID happened, I was just like, I would try to do the YouTube things, and I was just like, this is not the same. And I wasn't working out. And I was like, I know I need to like move my body at least a little bit. I'm very lazy. I like to be sedentary. What is the most sedentary workout I can possibly think of? Holding a plank. And so it became this thing that I have OCD, so I kind of became a little OCD about it. Like, for example, with Jury Duty, I was in my planking phase during Jury Duty. And at the beginning of 2022, I said it was going to be my New Year's resolution to start January 1st with a 1-minute plank. And that every month I was going to do a 1-minute plank for every month. And then I was going to increase it by a minute so that I could get to a 12-minute plank by December. And I wound up getting to a 30-minute plank, which is great.
Yes, you did.
I'm not at that now. Now I'm back to a 10-minute, but it became an OCD magical thinking thing for me, where when I was on the set of Jury Duty, because it was so high stakes and every day literally could be like the end of every day could have blown up the show if Ronald realized that things were not right. It became an OCD magical thinking thing where I was like, every day before Ronald would arrive to set, I would have to do my plank. And if I didn't, I was like, he's gonna find out today. It became tied in my head. And I was like, I have to do my plank. I got to do my plank. If I don't do my plank, Ronald's going to know really bad. So yeah, planking is my thing. I will say overall, I do think, I know it's like, I need to do more than just planking, but it's better than nothing. And it has improved my body, like on an aesthetic level. And I do feel stronger, and like little things, like for example, Dan has gotten really into crossbows lately, which I don't know anything about. Him and Shaker actually did some crossbows together, but the other day that we were doing crossbows, and a girlfriend of mine was like, it's hard to like hold the crossbow thing, like it takes, and so she was like struggling with it, and she's like, oh God, it's really hard. And I was like, let me try. And it was no problem for me. And she was like, holy shit, it must be because of the planking. And I was like, it must be, because I literally don't do anything else. So it's got to be the planking. So I like the planking. So
well, you did attempt pull-ups, because I saw you.
I didn't do, like, it took me a while to get to one pull-up. Like I have a pull-up fail video where I was just doing the thing where like when you're first getting started and you're supposed to hold at the top and then slowly lower down. I have a video of me doing that where it was before I got like a proper pull-up bar. It was the one that's like just between the doors. And I fell on my ass. Thank God I have it on video. It was one of the funniest things ever. I mean, nothing makes me laugh more than someone falling down, and if it's me,
Epic.
really. But I can still do pull-ups, but that was going to be my next thing, and then I didn't really follow through with that. But I can do at least one, and then like I can do like 10 mini ones at the top.
Well, maybe I can give you some pointers on that, because you were doing it the right way, but and actually the planking will help you a lot in that. But there's the rigidity that is, well, I shouldn't call it rigidity, but the stabilization that is required to do a plank is the same amount of stabilization that's required for doing a proper pull-up. Yeah. And a lot of times when people break that stability, so like if they bend their legs or they cross their legs or whatever, you're changing the stability. But you know, if I see you in person at some point, I can take you through that. I think it would be really fun.
I would love that. Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, and I have to say, this might be. I think this is probably the first time I ever admitted this, but like, you actually inspired me to do longer planks, because really? I used to think, 100%. Like I ended up buying. It's so funny because I think you were posting it like every day, weren't you?
I was for up until really recently, and then I kind of stopped. But yeah, I mean, I've still been planking, but I've been posting it. Yeah.
Right. So I'm sitting there watching, and I'm like, you know, I've been through that, and I thought I was like hot stuff, like doing a 10-minute plank, and I may have told you, actually, the video in which Roger Waters mentions that he brings me on tour and then I train him, part of that video, he talked about doing a 7-minute plank. And it's true, like I was side by side with him. And that was a point in which we built up to doing 7-minute static plank, no moving. And then I was able to do a 10-minute plank with movements, like side plank, reverse plank, you know, all that kind of stuff.
Right now I'm doing 10 with inner, like I'm doing 3 and then side, and then but keep going. Yeah.
But it's all very, very beneficial. All of it's very beneficial. And when I started watching you do it, I was like, okay, you know what? Like, this is motivation for me. Like, why don't I tackle this again? Like, you know, why did I stop at 10, right? And so I attempted to try to do more than that. And I even had, like, backstage when we do these concert tours, you know, me and some of the security guards, like, we challenge each other to do random things, and we put up real money. And I had an opportunity to win $300 to do a 7-minute plank, because they knew that was like the longest I had done static. And I only got to 6 minutes, and I was crushed, because like that was the point in which I didn't lose any money, right? So if I got to 6 minutes, I didn't lose any money. But if I got to 7 minutes, then I got all the money, and I only got to 6 minutes. But it just tells you like how mental it is, right? It's very mental, physical as well. But yeah. Anyway,
I forget what the guy's name is right now. It's blanking. I'm blanking on it. But the guy, I think his name, George Hood, I think is his name. He is like, I think, the current Guinness World Record holder for longest male plank. And the difference between male and female, I have to say, is crazy. Like I think he's at 9 hours, 30 minutes versus a woman is 4 hours, 20 minutes, which is insane. But he had like a mantra that was like, be like a tree, and you're like, just imagine your roots in the ground and nothing can sway you, and like you're just there. And something about that tree image and the roots going down into the ground, I definitely do visualize that when I'm like struggling in a plank moment where I'm like, I can't hold it anymore. And then also, I will say, when I was planking during jury duty, Nicholas Hatton, one of the amazing producers on the show, who's a dear friend of mine, he tricked me. So like one day I didn't have my stopwatch, and so I was like, can you time me? I'm at a 12-minute plank right now. Can you time me? And he tricked me. He was like, I was like, it's been 12 minutes, right? And he's like, nope, keep going. And I went all the way to 16 minutes because he just lied to me. I mean, he was lying to me, like, you're not there yet. And to the point of where I just finally like collapsed. And I was like, how could I not have gotten to 12? It felt like so much longer. And he's like, He's British. He's like, mate, you just did 16 minutes.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's part of what inspired me to go all the way up to 30 for the new year. This was back in 2022, but like that's what part of what inspired me was like, I was like, well, if I can do 16, like let me just keep going. And then I just kept kind of going and going. But then I took like a week off and then went back to it and was like, I can't even do 5 anymore. It's crazy how fast that muscle memory goes away.
Wow. Yeah, but before George Hood, actually, I think it was 2 people before him, but the guy who, I don't remember his name, but there was this kind of like Eastern European guy, older guy, who had the world record or the Guinness record. And at that time, it was like 8 hours. It was like right at 8 hours. And there was like an interview, I guess, that had circulated in which they spoke to him and said, do you feel like you could have done longer? And he was like, oh, absolutely. And then he was like, well, why did you stop at 8 hours? And he basically was like, every day since his kids were born, he and his wife and his family had dinner together every single day. And the reason why he stopped was because he would have missed dinner if he had kept going. And so he just stopped and went to go have dinner with his family.
That's beautiful.
And I was, amazing, right?
Yeah, I love that.
So I was like, wow. But to think about even the female world record.
4 hours. I'm like, that's insane. Yeah.
Let's think about this. Most people can't even sleep still for 9 hours, 9.5 hours.
No, it really is. And so much of it is mental, but like it is also physical, obviously, but like so much of it is mind over matter and just being like, you can do it. But no, at this point, I'm at a 10-minute and that's like very, doing this, then side, back. But if I were to just try to hold forearm plank, I don't think I could get more than a few minutes at this point. It's amazing to me, like the George Hoods and I forget her name. I think her last name is Glowacka, but the female world record holder, they're amazing. It's like so inspiring to watch that. Yeah.
Well, there's something I would challenge you at. And one obviously is to get back into those pull-ups, because I think that would be really amazing for you to do. And I would love to see you conquer more than one for sure. And then, but another one is called the Chinese back plank. Are you familiar with that?
No.
Hey, Gordon, can you go to my my IG and see if you can look that up? Mm-hmm. Like it's, I don't know where it is. It's down there somewhere, and we'll keep talking. But like, if you find it, it should just say Chinese back plank, I think, in the avatar. But anyway, basically what you do is you can take 3 chairs. And actually, the video, if he's able to find it, the video was of me doing this backstage in one of the concerts. And I was just I'm always looking for content. So I was like, all right, let me try this back plank. So I got 3 chairs. 2 chairs are at the position of your arms or your elbows, like your triceps, basically. And so you have one in one chair, one in the other chair, and then both of your feet. And so you're looking up, and then both of your heels are on the 3rd chair. So you kind of make like a triangle. And then what you do is you push your chest and your butt and your hips and everything up so that you're suspended. That, Cody, is insanely difficult.
That sounds amazing. I want to try that.
Yeah, you want to talk about getting strong?
I got this like silly thing called a booty sprout. It's this like dumb, it's right here. It's like basically it's like because I don't have like a proper workout like station, I wanted to do hip thrusts, like where you like, have I wanted to do those, but I don't have like a weight bench and I don't have all the things. So I found this booty sprout thing, and it's very different from what you're saying, but in terms of like you add these resistance bands across your waist and then you kind of hold yourself up and then you're thrusting. And I do definitely feel like it in my, glutes and my thighs, but I want to try what is it? The Chinese backwards plank?
Back plank. Yeah, it's called a Chinese back plank.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's quite intense. And anybody that tries it, like I always say to people, if you can get a minute, well done.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
like it's and Yeah. Oh, did you pull it up?
I couldn't find yours, but I pulled up this guy. But
Okay,
he's
pull
pretty
it
in
up.
shape, and
Yeah.
he was struggling just to do like 30 seconds. Look like.
For some reason, I don't see it on mine. Anyway, it's or I'll send it to
I'll check
you
that out
in
for
a
sure.
DM.
I want to try
Yeah.
that. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, okay, as we, we kind of start to get towards the tail end of this, I want to make sure that like we have the opportunity to talk more about like what's on the horizon for you, or what are some of the things that like you want to achieve, because you've achieved a lot, but it sounds like there's still some things out there that you want to do. So what are some things that you're looking to do in the near future?
That's a great question. I think because of the writer's strike, I think I mean, I definitely feel this, and I feel like most of my writer friends are also feeling this sort of sense of like the industry is in such a bizarre place right now where we don't really know like what is going to happen, and it's kind of contracting, and it's in a very bizarre place. So it's hard to say, but I do know that I want to keep telling stories, and I will say like working on. Ooh, I need to change out my ring light. Sorry. Working on jury duty was amazing because it was so unlike any other project I had ever done before. With most shows, you have the script, and then when you're in the production stage, it's very it's obviously the stakes are still high, and there's still a lot that can go wrong, and it's stressful, but you know that you're gonna, at the end of the day, there's going to be a show. It's going to be a show. Whether or not it's good, that's a whole other thing. But with jury duty, there was genuinely like, we didn't know if it was gonna work. We didn't know if Ronald was gonna believe it all the way through. And there was something about the real life stakes of that was so exhilarating and exciting that there is definitely a part of me that's now like, I want to make more stuff in that sort of semi docu reality space, because it is just so fun and exciting. And like, there were days where I was like it's the highest highs and the lowest lows. Like the one time when he was like, this feels like a reality show, and I thought that he like was on to us. Turns out he just meant like, this feels crazy. But in the moment, I crawled under the desk, and I crawled into a ball, and I was just like, oh my God, like Nick, and then Andrew Weinberg, who was one of the other amazing writer producers on the show. Like, I was just like, you guys, it's done. That's it. Like it was the lowest low, but then that makes the highs so much higher because you've experienced those low lows. So it was just really, really fun, and makes me want to do more stuff in that vein.
Well, we'll definitely be sort of in touch and trying to like see what you have going on, because everything you've touched so far has been quite incredible. And I'm not just saying that, like it was part of the reason why, again, I wanted to have you on the show, because we are fans, obviously, and and I'm really interested to see like what else comes down the pipeline. So yeah.
Thank you so much. And I am such a fan of yours, and I'm so glad that we came into each other's worlds, and I can't wait to meet you in person and for you to teach me how to do the backwards Chinese backward plank and more pull-ups.
For sure. Well, one thing before I go into the last couple of questions is because I thought this was also very interesting, because the fact that like we know each other through Shaker, I guess there was not a point in which maybe it wasn't mentioned that I work with Roger Waters, and so I think you one day sent a message in the group chat that we have with Shaker and I, and it was kind of like, what? But Shaker and I were kind of like, oh, she didn't know, right? Because like we kind of thought everybody that knows me knows that I work with him because I'm with him all the time. But I thought that was kind of interesting because yeah, in fact, I had a conversation with him. I think I told you this, but I had a conversation with Roger about the pros and cons of hitchhiking, because I hadn't heard of it. And I've heard him mention it in passing, because I think he just kind of assumes everybody knows all of his music, but I don't. Like I grew up listening to hip hop and R&B, and wasn't listening to Pink Floyd. But obviously now I'm really into it, and I understand like there's a lot of messaging, and he's a brilliant writer. He's an amazing writer, and so yeah, so we had a conversation about you, and it was fun.
I'm so honored. He is such an incredible storyteller. I really am like, just, I mean, I grew up, my, you know, as I said, my dad's a photographer, so we would go on all these road trips, and we would, Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking was like our go-to album that we would listen to from beginning to end on every trip. And just recently, so my dad now, he just recently moved to a ghost town in the desert. It's literal like population 26 people. So my best friend Sophie and I just went to go visit my dad, and we were like driving around the desert, and we were listening to Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking, and I was like, it's just so fucking good, and I can't believe, yeah, what a small world. It's just crazy.
What a small world. Well, if I have anything to do with it, you know, this man will continue doing his work and touring, and you know, using his platform to try to help humanity in you know, in his way. And you know, maybe there's going to be more.
I will say one thing. When the day that Trump got elected, and I was just like, you know, I literally like couldn't even be around other people. I was, you know, I think as many people, just so depressed and in such a dark place. I was like, I need to cry. I need to like have like a cathartic cry. And so I watched The Wall. Like I watched the movie of The Wall in order to cry. And it was just like the most cathartic, just like got all those tears out. And yeah, Roger is amazing.
Yeah, well, I agree. And it's unfortunate with all this stuff that's happening in the world. I'm sure you see it, but like, it really is unfortunate that people don't get a chance to understand what he really is about, because of whether you call it propaganda or just certain beliefs and things like that. But like, he really is, like, he's like a father figure to me. And I would like to think that people who truly know me know that I wouldn't work with someone that at least wasn't an authentic and genuine person, and really wants the best out of life in the best of ways.
Yeah.
Because, you know, it's like, I feel like I'm at a point in my career where I could work with, you know, almost anyone I want to work with, right? And I choose to work with him because, you know, it's like, first of all, he's 80 years old and he's still doing a world tour. And I don't think this is the last one, by the way, you know, between us.
You know? He is fire. Goddamn. Yeah.
Oh, hot take. Okay. All right. Well, let me get to these last couple of questions, and then I'll let you get on your day, because I know, you know, you got shows to run. So I think this is probably one of my most fun questions, because when I have someone on the show, I like to get to know them beyond just their career and their expertise. And so I like to ask the question, what are your top 2 pet peeves as of right now? Like, what are a couple of things that just really get under your skin or really annoy you? And it can be about anything. It doesn't have to be about your work.
Okay. I don't have like go-tos that are like things that I really have marinated on, but I'll just kind of improvise. One thing right now I will say, I hate the way that social media has played what I think is to be a detrimental role in everything, all the awfulness that's going on in the world right now. I feel like it has become not good, not helpful, and I don't like it. It is a pet peeve. So I am kind of like staying away from social media right now, which is, I feel like, better for my mental health in a way, because I'm just like, this is it's already such a nightmare in a real way, and then for it to go onto social media and become this infighting about it's awful. My other pet peeve is when people are not curious. This, going back to your thing earlier of like, I think we both share a natural curiosity about other people and about the world. Like when I meet someone who just has no curiosity at all about not just about me, but just like about other people or about the world, when they're just narcissistic in that way that they only want to talk about themselves. And I realized I just did a whole podcast where all I did was talk about myself. So I get
No.
But yeah, I would say my pet peeve is like people who don't ask questions about other people. Like I remember when I was single and I was in my dating years and I was going on lots of dates and going on dates with certain people that would just like not ask any questions. And I'd be like, I have so many questions. I want to know so much about this person. But then when they had no questions to ask back, I feel like that is the sign of someone that is not my kind of person.
Right. Not as invested, or I totally get that. I agree with you on that one too, because it should be this back and forth flow. Otherwise it feels like an interview, and who wants to date an interviewer, right? You know, it's like,
or even like
yeah.
with that. I mean, even though we're in an interview right now, but now I'm so excited to meet you in person because I have so many questions to ask you, because I'm like, I'm just so excited. Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely have fun, because I can just tell by your energy and just getting to know you now, but also just like through our text and things like that. Like I feel like I've gotten a chance to kind of understand how you are as a person, and I feel like we're gonna have a blast. So I look forward to that as well. So the last question is, what is something you're most grateful for?
I am most grateful for my core like family friend circle, including my dogs. So like my dogs, Dan, my mom, my dad, my sister, my niece, my nephew, my core family, but then also like my very close friends. I feel really lucky to have a group of people that like are always there for me, and a lot of people don't have the luxury of having that, and I feel like I feel like I should tell them more how grateful. I mean, I tell my dogs all the time, but aside from the dogs who can't understand, I feel like I should tell the rest of the people in my life how grateful I am for them, because truly I do believe that as humans, we are social creatures, and all of our happiness and value and worth comes from our social connections and just connecting with people. And I feel like I am very lucky to have a group of amazing people in my life who I look up to and value and admire and have fun with and can be silly with and can be myself with. And that's the greatest joy of life, I think.
Well, I will say this, if you do happen to share this with all of your friends, your core people, then you essentially would be telling them that. So that is very special. And that's one of the reasons why I like to ask that question, because I think the gratitude and having a gratitude practice is very, very important. And it's obviously something that most successful people in the world have, is some form of a gratitude practice. And I think that's amazing. And what's really funny is when you first started to explain what you were most grateful for, and you said your core, I was thinking, what? She's happy because she can do a plank? Like your core. I was like, oh, okay. But then you rounded it out. So well done.
I love that. Amazing.
Well done. All right. So if people want to keep in touch with you, like what's the best way to kind of keep an eye on all things Cody Heller?
I mean, I know I said my pet peeve was social media, but Instagram is probably the best way. I'm still like on there. I'm just avoiding like weighing in on the controversy right now, because I don't feel like my opinion is especially helpful or educated enough to be helpful. But yes, my Instagram is I think it's Normal Heller on Instagram. But yeah, that is the best way to follow my life and my adventures and my planks when I get back to I am still planking, but when I get back to like, showing my planks.
Exactly.
But yeah.
Cool. Well, I want to send my deepest gratitude for your time, and thank you for making time to come onto the show and to be so open and vulnerable about everything that you do. I think it's amazing. And also, I want to thank the listeners and the viewers for taking the time. If you listened up to this point, thank you for all the support, because this is what drives the show. And Cody, let's be in touch.
Yes,
Good
and I
job.
want to thank you so much. It's such a pleasure. I think you're incredible. And thank you to all the people who maybe are watching and listening. And also thank you to Shaker for introducing us.
Shaker Pie.
Shaker
That's right.
Pie.
Okay, well, this is Josh signing out from Simply Walk the Talk. Peace.
Simply walk the talk. Walk the talk, talking facts. Move like me, but I move a little fast. Make my move, here to last. Fasten these seatbelts, I'm coming past. Take care of me, longevity. Hack my biology, better believe. Walking the talk, soul, mind, and body connected. Better come give us a listen.